Hello, class. It's Miss Roberts here, and tonight we're going to discuss dynamics of interpersonal communication. Let's go ahead and get started. The slideshow here. All right, we must have to the white space. So let's talk about different dynamics in interpersonal relationships, and we're going to talk about the NAPS relational model. But first off, we're going to discuss why do we link up with certain people in the first place. Now, when we talk about dynamics of interpersonal relationships, at least for right now, we're focusing on friendships and romantic partnerships. Now, when we talk about familial relationships, relationships with family, it's a little bit different because we are born into or adopted into the families that we are. But if you want to apply some of these some of these reasonings to family, you can think about which family members you gravitate to the most. So some of these might fit that, some of these might not. So for this chapter, it primarily focuses on friendships and or romantic partnerships. So first off, and this is more towards romantic partnerships, is appearance. Sometimes we connect with someone because we like the way they look, right? Or if we're talking about a friendship, maybe that person looks nice, as having a nice personality, or you click, or you connect, or you look similar, or they're wearing the same t-shirt at the same band as you, so you want to talk to them about it. But sometimes appearance might be the thing that connects people together. Now, when you think about long-term relationships, although appearance may be important to that dynamic, it can't be the only thing that connects, or it can't be the only glue that binds that relationship together. So it's nice to have someone who looks good to us, but we need to have more substance to have a longer lasting relationship. And as we go on to that relational model and how those relationships ebbs and flows, then you'll get a better understanding why. Next up, we have similarity. So the similarity thesis is this: we are attracted to people, or we are drawn to people who are most like us. This can apply to romantic partnerships because we might have something in common with the person. We can apply this to friendships because we might have a bond with someone who has the same interests as us or shared the same experience. For example, someone who's been in the same class as us, or you went to grade school with, or someone who we share different likes with. Or if you have a family member who you are emotionally close to than others, then you might bond with these same hobbies, similar to a friendship. Similarities are validating, so if someone's like us or someone else is like us, that means we're okay. And because we're so similar, we can try to predict how they would act in certain situations and possibly reduce conflict. And we assume that people who are like us will like us. Then again, reducing conflict. But then we have complementary. So for instance, have you ever heard of the term opposites attract? Well, that can happen in all types of dynamics. For example, some romantic partnerships, you might look at them or you might understand the different personalities and you're like, how are they together? Well, sometimes those differences might help them bond and be stronger. We can also apply this to friendships. So I have a very close friend who is the opposite of me in many ways. She's more introverted. She has a more logical outlook on life. She's really good at statistics. I am none of those things. But our friendship works. For instance, I always encourage her to go out and go try different things, and she encouraged me to stay in and save money by doing low-key things at home. And we have different perspectives about different things. So she has a different perspective that usually helps me out, and I present a different perspective on her situation, which she probably wouldn't have thought about. So we kind of balance each other out. So people who are seemingly on the surface the opposites might connect on a different level. And this can apply to anybody. Have you ever connected with a relative that is the total opposite? Maybe you have a favorite cousin, maybe a favorite sibling, and you have a stronger emotional bond, even though you're complete opposites. Even though we are adopted or born into the families we are into, sometimes we have stronger bonds with certain relatives because maybe we're similar or we're opposite. And just like in friendships, you balance each other out. Okay. So next we're going to explore the social exchange theory. Now, this is about as mathy as I'm going to get, but bear with me. Think about, why do you hang out with the people you hang out with? And why do they hang out with you? Have you ever thought of relationships as a cost and a reward? Think about it for a second. What are some of the good things that we get when we interact with our loved ones, our friends, family, or romantic partners? So, for instance, maybe you have a friend who always gives a listening ear or is always fun and you can always hang out with. So you have a good time with that person. Maybe you have a strong relationship with your mom because she understands you, who you are, a little bit better, or strong relationship with your dad, and your personalities just click and mesh. So when you hang out, have a good time. Maybe you chose your romantic partner because when you're with that person, they give you butterflies and they affirm you and they make you feel special, and that feels really good. So with the social exchange theory, those emotions and those sentiments will be rewards. But with reward, there's also a cost. So for example, you have a friend that you really love hanging out with, but he or she is always in dramatic romantic relationships. So, occasionally when that person gets into a romantic relationship and they break up, then you got to hear about it. But it's cool because you love them. Or you have a romantic partner and they're a little bit messy and you're a neat freak. So the cost of hanging out with them is you got to kind of deal with the messy person for a little while. Or you have a younger brother or younger sister that you have to cook for all the time. And you love them and they're good people, but the cost of hanging out with them is that you cook the meals, but they clean up. That's not okay. That's kind of like my life, right? I'm a cook and my brother's a cleaner, but that's a different story. That's a different story. But there is a cost and a reward to each interaction. So to hang out and to interact with this person or with these people, there are goods and bads to it. So when we talk about or refer to the social exchange theory, we seek out people who can give us rewards that are greater than or equal to the cost we encounter when we're dealing with them. So let's think about that again. We seek out people who can give us rewards that are greater than or equal to the cost we encounter when dealing with them. So the rewards, the outcomes we desire, think of togetherness, warmth, comfort, love, fun times. But the cost as well. Undesirable personality traits, drama, sometimes you gotta spend money on them. But as long as the rewards outweigh the costs, relationship is good. Now, when the costs are greater than the rewards, then there's a problem with the relationship. So let's discuss these two scenarios. So it's a lot easier to talk about this in romantic partnerships, but you can apply it to other relationships as well. For instance, say if there is a romantic partnership and they're having problems, they're going through it, all these things. So this behavior is prolonged, and the couple and the individuals in the couple as a unit have to decide whether they should stay or should they go. So comparison is the minimum standard of acceptable behavior. So you want to make sure that no matter what dynamic you have with anybody, you have to know your boundaries and what would you do if someone crosses a boundary. So what is the minimum acceptable behavior that you would accept, and what behavior would you not accept? So for example, I'm really big about tone. I don't like when people talk down to me, or I don't like it when people don't talk to me with respect, especially if I talk to them with respect. So if someone disrespects me or has a very short tone with me, especially when it's not warranted, I don't like it. So that's my minimum standard of acceptable behavior. Next up, we have comparison levels of alternatives. So think about it like this. You have an individual who's in a not so great romantic partnership. So that person has to decide, should they stay with the person, or should that person take a chance and go and seek another partner? Now, of course, they'll break up with the partner, of course. But if you or someone you know has been in that situation and the relationship isn't going very good, they have to figure out, do they stay and work it out, or do they take advantage of the comparison levels of alternatives and say, I'm just going to go on the app and find somebody else. I'm going to meet someone else in another context, like school or work or something like that, and try my luck out elsewhere. So there's comfort, even though it's not a great relationship, there's comfort being with the same person. That's why people stay so long, or one of the reasons why people stay so long. It's a little bit scary to see, like, okay, what else is out there? But sometimes it's better just to break up, cut your losses, and see if you can find someone else elsewhere. Okay. Next up, we have competency. So we are attracted to people who seem like they got it together. And no matter which type of area, whether it be academics or wealth, style, class, we are drawn to people who have something that we might want, right? Some characteristic that we might want. However, something interesting happens. We want to have these skills and abilities, right? And we want them to rub off on us. But if someone's too competent, too pretty, too handsome, too rich, too successful, too put together, it almost seems like, oh, they're out of our league. And I'm not just talking about romantic partnerships, I'm just talking about just people in general. If they are too out of our league, then it makes us a little uncomfortable. So we like people slightly above our level so we can get to their level, but are comfortable when that gap happens. So we like people with a little bit of a flaw because it reminds us of ourselves and reminds us that they're human. So it's a balancing act. We like people who have something about themselves, but not too perfect. Then we have proximity. We have a tendency to form bonds with people who we're around, whether we're close to or we have close access to. So let me ask you a question. Have you ever been or known people who have experienced a workplace romance? Some of those workplace romances turn into marriages. Think about that couple from The Office. I forgot their names. But you know what I'm talking about if you watched The Office. So why does that happen? Work can be fun, but work is work. Can someone find a spouse there? And if so, why? One of the reasons is, think about it. You're in the office 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. Oftentimes, say if you're living with someone in the house or somewhere else, you might see that work person or that employee or that coworker, that's what I'm looking for, that coworker more than your friends or more than people that you live with. So sometimes strong friendships and or romantic partnerships can form. But also, say if you're with a person all the time, sometimes that can breed contempt. What they mean is sometimes you can hang around a person too much, so having a little bit of individual space is a good thing. I'm in the words. All right. So just a little excuse me, just a little reminder about disclosure. We talked about disclosure more in chapter 3, but disclosure is very important because to share important details about yourself helps with trust. And if you reciprocate that disclosure, that helps solidify the relationship. Next up, we have the NAPS relational model. Now I'm going to focus on the diagram really quickly, and then I'm going to break down each part and what it means. I like this diagram. It's a Venn diagram. And I like how they broke it up to 3 major groupings and how some of those groupings overlap. Now you can talk about the NAPS relational model in regards to a friendship, but it's a lot easier to talk about it in a romantic partnership type of sense. So I'm going to stick to that just so it'll be more clear cut, especially in the bonding phase. Now, this phase is when couples are coming together, and see how it can ebb and flow between the coming together phases and the relational maintenance phase. This is the initial stages of the relationship. Now, the relational maintenance part is when the couple got to know each other, a long-term relationship, and long-term relationships seem to ebb and flow. Good times, bad times. Sometimes you're close together. Sometimes you get on each other's nerves. And we sort of oscillate back and forth between these dynamics. But say if you get on each other's nerves a little too long, then it can spell trouble in paradise. The couple can come apart and the relationship can be terminated. Okay? So these stages when couples are coming together. Relational maintenance is when the couple are within the relationship. There's ebbs and flows with that dynamic. However, those are normal. But if the downturn or relationship lasts for too long, then it can be an indication of trouble and it can threaten the relationship. So we have the initiating phase. That's when the couple meets each other. The experimenting phase is when the couple goes on a couple of first dates, hangs out, gets to know each other. Sometimes romantic partnerships, or potential for romantic partnerships, don't make it past this phase because I've made this analogy before. First dates are almost like job interviews. You either get the job or you don't. So if you don't get the job or you don't pass the experimentation phase, no harm, no foul, because you didn't know each other that well in the first place. But then if you pass, or if you go beyond that experimental first date phase, then your feelings grow for each other, intense romantic feelings grow, and it helps the couple bond. It doesn't last forever though, and you start integrating lives, integrating friends, maybe move in together a little bit, or maybe not move in together now yet, but just hang out at each other's houses a lot more and just start to merge each other's lives a little bit more. Bonding, so I corrected myself. Bonding, that is when you move in together. You can either get married or cohabitate, but that bonding phase is a more serious commitment to each other, more skin in the game in regards to relationship, either through marriage or cohabitation. But then we have the differentiating phase, so that is the balance between being together and being apart. So, for example, having a little bit of alone time, hanging out with friends, then hanging out with each other. So it's not necessarily, it doesn't mean that you're coming apart. That's why we're in the relational phase. It's healthy to maintain your own identity versus an identity as a couple. Sometimes life gets a little bit hectic, especially say if the couple decides to have children. So circumscribing might occur where the couple, excuse me, where the couple might not see each other as much as they need to, or might not connect as much as they might want to. So it's up to them to acknowledge that and work to make time with each other so they can go back to the relational maintenance phase. So that's why it's part of coming apart, because if this lasts for too long, it could be a sign of trouble, but it's the natural ebb and flow of a relationship. Now, stagnation, that's when a relationship is in trouble, where the relationship seems stale, not novel, and the couple is a little bit of trouble. Is you can come back from this, but it's going to take a lot more work than the other two phases. Then we have the avoiding phase. That's when the couple, they don't get along, so they decide to stay away from each other. Now, can you come back from the avoiding phase? Yes, but it might take therapy and a lot of work, because if you're in this phase where you don't want to be around each other, you have to work your way back to wanting to be around each other, and it may or may not be worth it. But you can only avoid each other for so long, so the couple decides to terminate the relationship either through breaking up, moving out, or getting a divorce. Now, there's couples who don't get to this phase and just stay together forever, just mad and miserable, like up here. I don't understand it, but it happens, right? So sometimes a couple doesn't necessarily officially end it. But if they do end it, sometimes couples get right back together and go into this phase again. So it's a really interesting model to help understand the relationship. So I'm going to break it down a little bit more in these slides. So like I said, with the initiating phase, that's when you make contact, because you can't get in a relationship with someone that you never met, either physically or digitally. So it's pretty superficial. You just ask small talk questions, a little bit of conversation, say, hey, I want to get to know this person a little bit better, or I don't want to get to know this person a little bit better. But it's the opening stage of all relationships. Then you have experimentation. So, for example, you're trying to figure out what you have in common, what you like, what you don't like, what do you do, what your goals are. It seems like an audition. It's a safe way to ease into, and I might argue, out of relationship. So sometimes you're like, oh, I like this person's really nice, but this person isn't for me. And feelings might get hurt, but won't be as intense as in the terminating phase, where you went through the whole cycle and end the relationship. If you end it early, nip it in the bud, not as bad. But if you do decide to be together, then that's when things can get intense. So if you've experienced this, or if you've seen this happen before, where the romantic couple kind of like sticks together like glue, hangs out with each other all the time, you might think about your potential romantic partner, and you have this sense of being in love, this euphoria, this high, rather. However, this doesn't last forever, and you mellow out a little bit. But it's really fun, like the first part of romantic partnership where you're like, oh, I love this person so much. That's a really cool phase. Next, we have integrating. So you step out as a social unit, might become social media official, See, I'm an older Gen Y, so being social media official was the thing to do. But as I talk to my Gen Z and younger students, their students are like, you don't have to be on social media all the time. So I get it. So it's really interesting how different generations view coupling online. So it's really interesting. But in an integration phase, social circles might merge. You might have your own routines and rituals like date nights on Fridays, soul food Sundays, taco Tuesdays, all those things. Since the obligation grows for one another and requests are straightforward and expectations are heightened of the person because, that's your romantic partner and you expect a lot of good things out of them. Excuse me. Next up, we have bonding. So you have to get married when you're bonded. Married. Well, not quite. So when this model was created, the natural step wasn't marriage. Cohabitation was a little bit more taboo, but we modernized the theory to include cohabitation, civil partnerships, and the like. So if you want to move into each other, get engaged, have a marriage, a verbal pledge, that is a symbol that you are bonded as a unit. And the stakes are higher, especially when there's a marriage involved, because there's legal paperwork involved. So it's not about, oh, I don't like this person anymore, I'm going to break up. No, you have to have lawyers and all these types of things. So this is where things get really real. Relationships don't have to be romantic to achieve bonding. So, like I said before, even though I'm talking about a romantic partnership in this example of the natural relational model, you can apply these to friendships as well. Even though in friendships you don't have a written friend contract, like I will be your friend forever, signed Sabrina. When relationships, excuse me, when friendships are long term, they can also achieve an informal bonding. All right, gotta move myself again. I'm constantly using myself. Okay. So like I said before, in differentiating phase, that's when you're negotiating like, okay, to what degree is my identity based on my relationship and what part of my identity is just based on me as an individual. The our versus I type of dynamic. So couples who can navigate this do a little bit better because you're able to still be a strong unit, but also give room for individual activities and interests and hanging out with friends and things like that. You're not up under each other all the time, but you still have love for each other. So it's a normal part of relational maintenance. However, sometimes with circumscribing, work gets in the way. There might be children involved. People are busy. So even in the best romantic relationships, sometimes it's hard to keep it together as busy adults. As long as the partners acknowledge this is going on and work to schedule time together, it should be fine. Things like this happen all the time. But if the couple is growing apart and not remedying the situation or not having an understanding, then this can lead into trouble. So the couple is separating and the couple is having arguments. They're in a relationship, but they're not joyful about it. It's just a shell of his former self. No sense of joy. Not good. Could you come back from this? Yes, but it's going to take a lot of work because there's cracks in a relationship, trouble in paradise, and you have to address the root of those issues before you can get back to a good place. Next up, we have avoiding. Now, there are several types of avoiding that can occur according to this model. Of course, there's a physical or emotional distance. You might express detachment, so you might zone out when they're speaking, or they don't have that same warmth or togetherness as before. You might avoid each other, no touching,